lunch?
I don't know yet. I like my choices.
America Decides tomorrow on CBS Mornings.
I know when I wake up on Sunday mornings and I step into this studio, I'm always looking at where the story goes next.
Tonight, a special edition of Evening News live from New Hampshire, where Norah O'Donnell leads team coverage as voters prepare for tomorrow's primary. Plus, how Democrats are leaning into reproductive rights to rally voters on the CBS Evening News.
I am today suspending my campaign. It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance.
The radical left Democrats are supporting Nikki for a very simple reason, because they know she's easy to beat.
You've got 70% of Americans don't want to see a Trump-Biden rematch. More of the same is the fact that both of these presidents put us trillions of dollars in debt.
Hello, I'm Ed O'Keefe. Welcome to a special edition of America Decides, live from CBS News New Hampshire primary headquarters in Manchester, with just a few hours left until the primary begins here in the Granite State, late tonight up in Dixville Notch. By this time tomorrow, however, we will get our first early sense of what primary voters here in New Hampshire think of their options, the top issues of concern, and ultimately who they believe should lead this state as the winner. For Republicans, they have just two choices left: former President Donald Trump and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. More on that in a moment. For Democrats, they have a few choices, but the contender the party hopes will win, President Biden, isn't even officially on the ballot. We'll get into that as well later this hour. New Hampshire is the next step in what has become an accelerated and somewhat muted campaign season, with the fog of inevitability enveloping both the Democratic and Republican contests. This state will hold the first primary as its state law requires. And then, who knows? But there may not be much of a contest left for this year, once again raising questions that are asked every 4 years. Do we put too much emphasis and influence in the hands of fewer than 500,000 people who have cast or are expected to cast ballots in Iowa and New Hampshire? Are New Hampshire and Iowa worthy of this incredible power, or is the way we pick a president in need of rethinking? Consider the expense of it all. More than $77 million have been spent on advertising across this tiny state that has just 873,000 registered voters. That's even before we factor in how much campaigns spent to hold rallies, mail and call voters, and feed and house those volunteers and staff who are helping out. So is it worth it? That's something to debate and consider yet again in the coming days and years. So first, we begin with the latest on Nikki Haley's campaign with CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns out in the streets of New Hampshire tonight. Caitlin, as the last alternative standing, how is the campaign preparing, and how are they setting expectations ahead of tomorrow night?
Hey, Ed, good to see you. I just want to note that it has warmed up a little here in New Hampshire. I don't have gloves. I don't have a scarf. So this is welcome news, which raises a question about whether voters might be more incentivized to turn out as the weather heats up a little bit, relatively speaking. To the campaign, this is now very much a two-person race that Nikki Haley has been asking for. With DeSantis having dropped out, it's now between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. And what's interesting here is that if you think about it, they're not really competing for the same voters. You have base voters of the Republican Party very much endeared to the former president. Nikki Haley has been trying to court independent voters that we talk about here, 40% of the electorate here, moderate Republicans who may be willing to turn the page. But it's really just going to be a small percentage of really persuadable voters that Nikki Haley is going to have to overperform with in order to compete with Donald Trump. We talk about New Hampshire as a place that has fertile ground for underdogs hoping to tap into that undeclared independent electorate here, but it's also an independent electorate that went for Trump in 2016 in that primary and fueled his path to the nomination. And Republicans on the ground I've been talking to here say that it's still very much an uphill climb for Haley, and not all independent voters are alike. Remember, some of them are going to be supporting Trump because they don't necessarily support the Republican Party, but they do support him.
And real quick, Caitlin, at the end of tomorrow night, are they good with a 10-point margin in between these two? Do they want to keep it within single digits? What's the goal for her team?
It is a good question, Ed. She has been saying that she wants a strong finish here, but what does that look like? We've seen over the course of the past few days the team sort of try to manage expectations. Chris Sununu, the popular governor here who's campaigning all over the state for her, has said that a strong second place finish, just getting this down to a one-on-one race, has achieved a goal, and a strong finish is desired. But I talked to the Republican chairman of the New Hampshire Republican Party here today, and he said really she has to come within single digits to be able to make that case for continuing on. Otherwise, it's Trump's glide path to the nomination.
We shall see. Caitlin Huey-Burns in Salem, New Hampshire tonight. More from you as the evening progresses. We'll also hear from Nikki Haley directly in a conversation with Norah O'Donnell later this hour. Stay tuned for that. But for now, we turn to CBS Mornings co-host Tony DeCopel and CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa here with us inside in New Hampshire. Tony, good to see you after the sun sets, as well, as opposed to as it's rising. Bob, always good to see you. Bob, let's start with you, tracking the Trump campaign here with a day to go. Where's their head at? What are they thinking ahead of tomorrow?
Well, former President Trump was in a courtroom today, yet again. And that's so indicative of where this campaign stands. The Trump campaign has him in a courtroom, then has him on the campaign trail. And that's really been the balancing act they've had. And for most campaigns, if you're facing legal challenges, it's going to be a political burden. But when you talk to Trump sources these days, they think it actually fuels him in the primary, because it stokes the motivations of his voters, stokes those grievances. And he's going to keep showing up, whether it's at the civil level, the state level, criminal stuff on the federal level. It is kind of the essence of the Trump campaign at this moment, that he's casting himself as a perceived victim of a political and legal establishment.
And that's where so much of his focus, his juice, and the potential growth and fundraising appeal is right now. Right?
Yes and no. I mean, when I talk to my sources in Washington, they say, for now, this helps Trump, because the base likes to see that he's fighting the court, he's fighting Jack Smith, the special counsel. But when I talk to my sources in the Senate and in the House, they ultimately think all these legal challenges are going to be a burden on Trump, that mainstream voters come November 2024 are going to see this as a drag not only on Trump, but the fear is for many Republicans is that all these legal challenges will be a drag on the Republican ticket. Think about if that January 6th case, even if it doesn't start in March as scheduled, it could start in May, June, or July. That means all those January 6 issues, that populates the summer news cycle. That brings everything back to the fore.
Of all people you ran into at breakfast this morning,
I ran into Rudy Giuliani at the Red Arrow Diner.
Really?
Yeah. Rudy Giuliani, who's, of course, under scrutiny by federal investigators. But the fact that Rudy Giuliani is in the spotlight for his own legal challenges, but he's here on the campaign trail, and it's shrugged at by most Republicans, in fact, encouraged by Trump allies. That tells you everything about at least the Trump side of this race.
I didn't know.
He had thoughts on how well Haley has to do, right? Didn't he tell you?
So Rudy reflects what a lot of Trump people are saying, which is if she doesn't come within single digits or close, they think the race is all but over.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the race is over necessarily along that narrative, because if the money comes in after New Hampshire for Haley, she's in the race. These are only 2 out of 50 states. If she has the money to compete in Super Tuesday, she's still in this. The question is, does she want to take the political risk in South Carolina? It'd be like going into your home state and risking a loss. It's egg on your face politically. If she doesn't do well here, does she really take the risk and go into South Carolina? I'm not so sure, based on my reporting.
Yeah, and of course, if the money buys her new life in South Carolina, that adds to the attack that Donald Trump has been leveling against her, which is that, she's a corporate, old-school Republican, not a real Republican, not a MAGA Republican at all.
So back in the day, Bob and I worked with a guy named David Broder who used to do what you did over the weekend.
Talk to people?
Well, not only talk to people, but specifically in supermarket parking lots.
This is the place to be, and it's the place to be. Let's just
if
give
you come up to me in the supermarket parking lot, I'm walking away.
First of all, I help you with the groceries, so there's that, okay? And second of all,
Were you loading groceries in?
I loaded groceries, and I will put your cart away, okay? So I'm a benefit. I am an aid.
Camera's on.
I'm a companion and an aid. But so the big issue, and let's just give in for a second to the likelihood that this is going to be a Trump-Biden rematch in November, and also I'll give you some insight on why Trump is doing well right now with traditional Republicans, and it's the economy. money. When you talk to people outside of a grocery store, the macro numbers doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that unemployment is low. It doesn't matter that wages are rising. It doesn't matter that inflation is down a whole ton, like the biggest drop in modern history.
Right.
Because the things that people deal with in their lives every day, the frozen OJ that gets them through the winter, up double digits in the last year still. The steak they like on Friday, up double digits in the last year. That's the kind of stuff. Another one, this is a real one. The vending machine food, the snack you get at work. Maybe it's $1.25 now instead of $1. That annoys the heck out of people.
Sure does.
And it casts a gloomy mood over their entire lives, and they don't feel hopeful about the future. And they remember back to 2016, the economy was strong. Donald Trump came into office. It got even better for them. Their stock market was doing great. They felt optimistic, and so they're voting for that in the supermarket parking lots all over America.
And we have some of your conversation with these people. Why don't
Let's
we take
roll
a
it.
look?
I think I'm going to just not vote.
It's hard. To be honest with you, for me, I'm not sure. I don't know yet.
Really? A lot of people have already made up their mind, or they're totally disgusted and they're not going to vote
Well,
for
I'm
anybody.
disgusted. I'm going to vote because if you don't vote, then you can't complain.
Yeah,
Do
I mean,
appreciate her sentiments.
the most common thing I hear from voters, and this is true in every state I've been to so far, and even before the caucus and the primary, people are just disillusioned. I mean, Nikki Haley's not wrong when she says the overwhelming majority of Americans do not want a Trump-Biden rematch. Unfortunately, that's not bringing your traction. I'm going to give you one additional sticky data point here on the economy. The phones we all have in our pocket, officially, if you look at the data, this has declined in price by like 25%. But practically, it used to be $200, and now it's over $1,000.
Right.
So what's going on here? The federal data has a fuzzy correction for quality of the item. But the fact remains, your phone still costs 5 times more than it did when Obama was president.
Right.
People look at things like that they deal with every day, like the unreachability of their next smartphone, and they think, I'm screwed. I need a change. And Donald Trump still, for so many voters, represents that change.
And I wonder how many of those
unique to New
quiet voters are Trump voters. I remember in 2016, a lot of people would tell me, oh, I hate them both. I hate them both. But then they would say 5 or 6 questions in, oh, I kind of like Trump. There's still a social stigma for some voters when I encounter them to talk about their support for Trump. So I do wonder, does Trump have quieter support, or maybe it's Haley? Maybe people are fed up with Trump and his conduct and his legal challenges.
We shall see. In about 24 hours, when we start to get exit poll results, we'll see Tony DeCopel. We'll see you in the morning.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you both. Yeah.
Bob, working both ends of the candle. Thank you as well. And remember, stay with CBS News all day tomorrow for continuing coverage of the New Hampshire primary. However you stream us, stay with us. We're left with just 2 GOP contenders after Ron DeSantis' unexpected exit from the Republican primary. Next, we look back at the Florida governor's campaign and assess what went wrong. And as we look ahead to Tuesday's contest, we also want to look back at previous New Hampshire primaries throughout the hour. So let's start in 2016, when Donald Trump won his first contest of that historic campaign.
What do we really want to thank, right? We want to thank the people of New Hampshire. Congratulations to Bernie. In all fairness, we have to congratulate him. We may not like it, but I heard parts of Bernie's speech. He wants to give away our country, folks.
Live from New Hampshire, you're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's wrong with that argument?
What have you
Do
learned?
you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
I am today suspending my campaign. I'm proud to have delivered on 100% of my promises, and I will not stop now. It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Sunday announcing his sudden exit from the 2024 campaign. Rumors began swirling late last week, and the end came quickly as the DeSantis team determined it made much more sense to try to get out now and preserve future national political ambitions. Aaron Navarro is the CBS News campaign reporter who spent much of the past year covering the Florida governor, and Major Garrett is CBS News chief Washington correspondent and has seen a thing or two that blows up quite like this. Aaron, though, let me begin with you. Based on what you observed and reported over the last year or so, what was DeSantis's core pitch, and why didn't it land?
Well, the core pitch was that he would be an effective Trump, that he could fulfill some of the promises on immigration, building the wall, as DeSantis talks about, curbing government spending. But the problem was Trump was still in the race. And after every indictment, especially beginning in March, Trump's popularity rose in the Republican Party. And I saw it time after time in Iowa. You would run into a lot of DeSantis, Trump undecided voters. When I asked what the biggest difference is between the two, I would often hear that they like Trump's experience. They like that he's been in the White House. And that was really part of the reason why he failed to convert those voters. DeSantis.
And we can get into the nitty-gritty, but bottom line, there was a campaign, which a candidate is required to have.
Yes.
And there was a super PAC with $150 million at the start, which is nice to have. Yep. Legally, they're not supposed to really spend much time coordinating and talking to each other, but he tested the legal limits and is still being challenged. But in the end, it caused even greater confusion about what he was doing, where he was supposed to be, and what it was all about, right?
They intentionally wanted to go into that kind of gray area, but unintentionally it became murkier. The lanes of what the campaign was going to do and what the super PAC was going to do were not clearly defined. And as the campaign struggled to fundraise money, and especially you saw overspending in the early summer, the super PAC had to take on a lot of responsibilities that it wasn't necessarily meant to do. The super PAC was supposed to be this national, Super Tuesday-focused group while the campaign handled the first 4 states. But after the money didn't come in as much as they anticipated coming in, the super PAC started doing more events, started doing a lot of the ads in addition, as super PACs usually do. But they just did a lot of organizing, too, that the campaign historically would usually handle.
Yeah.
You've seen a few of these.
Yes. Look,
where does it rank?
So it's a big flameout. It's one of the biggest flameouts in American political history. And what Aaron just described is so fundamental to this miscalculation. Every successful campaign I've ever covered for the presidency is first and foremost a campaign with strategists, speechwriters, communications people, field organizers, all operating in one place off of one set of strategic documents and raising money to fund those things. It's much easier to raise money for a super PAC because you can have unlimited donations, but you can't use them in the same way.
Right.
Hard dollars in a campaign are hard to raise. You spend them wisely because you have to, and they also tell you how you're doing. You can't know how you're doing raising money through a super PAC. It's a sugar high.
Yeah.
And that was the disciplinary breakdown of the DeSantis campaign, thinking all these things could be handled by the super PAC. Fundamentally, they cannot. And that was the great strategic blunder among many, but that was by far, in my estimation, the largest.
The observation I had, too, is he didn't seem, besides his wife, his most trusted advisor, as any man's wife should be, could be, he didn't have some other, mercenary or longtime consigliere at his side who'd seen a thing or two and knew how to run one of these things.
Look, scaling up to a national campaign is always a huge challenge. Many, many people have failed to do it. Ron DeSantis isn't the first. But he didn't have a team around him that could look and tell him bad news, tell him to recalibrate, and help him improve things that were deficiencies in his own approach. You can run on a legislative agenda, but it's much harder if you don't have any common touch, or you can't communicate, or you can't work a room. And all three of those things were disadvantages, built-in disadvantages for DeSantis.
And just to add to that, if you look at his campaign staff, the campaign staff internally, a lot of it were Tallahassee loyalists, the people that were around for his big re-elect in 22, and they didn't have experience running a presidential campaign. It wasn't until later in the summer where you had David Polyansky, a Ted Cruz vet, who was at the super PAC, came on over to the campaign, that you started to see some adjustments. You got a new campaign manager, but by the end of the summer, this race was sort of baked, especially for Trump.
Yeah.
But this raises a question. And it's an interesting one circulating in New Hampshire today. Last night, former President Trump was not only generous, he was magnanimous.
Right.
And I'm told, behind stage, he was doubly complimentary of DeSantis. So much so that people listening to the former president were saying, what are you driving at? And Trump was beginning to say, DeSantis is just like me, MAGA. He's younger. He's a generational fit. And people were thinking, what are you talking about? Are you thinking about him as a running mate? I'm not sure that's going to go anywhere. But the way Trump was talking backstage last night led some people who were listening to him to think that Trump might think completely out of the box and think about DeSantis as a possible running mate. Again, I'm not suggesting that is a real thing. Thought bubbles in the Trump world are a dime a dozen.
Sure they are.
This could be momentary, a flash. He could just be like, I'm feeling really gracious and magnanimous and aspirational.
But we should
don't
put him on the
discount
list.
it. Don't discount it.
Yeah. Aaron Navarro, Major Garrett, thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
You're not done. We'll see much more from you along this campaign. You too, of course.
I hope I'm not done either, Ed.
You're not at all done, neither of you. Thank you both for being. In fact, Major is so not done that he'll be right here tomorrow night anchoring our special coverage starting at 5 p.m. Eastern on the CBS News Streaming Network. We'll see you then.
Excellent.
The roles will be reversed. We'll have fun.
We will.
And then there were just two. Nikki Haley and Donald Trump are all that's left in the New Hampshire Republican primary. We'll discuss each campaign strategy coming up. But first, New Hampshire in primary politics is often known for comebacks. The year was 2008, and after suffering a brutal blow in Iowa, John McCain was back in familiar territory where his straight talk strategy guided him to victory.
And when they asked, how you going to do it? You're down in the polls, you don't have the money. I answered, I'm going to New Hampshire, and I'm going to tell people the truth.
Live from the Granite State, you're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happiness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is a pretty place in the snow. Welcome back to our 1 hour America Decides from Manchester, New Hampshire. On the eve of the New Hampshire primary, voters are set to pick their candidate in tomorrow's First in the Nation contest. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell spoke a short time ago with former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley about the state of her campaign. Let's take a listen.
New Hampshire is being characterized as a last-ditch effort to topple Donald Trump. Is that how you see it?
No, think how ridiculous that is. First of all, you had only 56,000 votes in Iowa for him out of 3 million people in the state. He got less than 1.5% of the state of Iowa. And then you're going to say it's going to stop with New Hampshire? This is not a coronation. This is an election. You have Iowa, you have New Hampshire, you have South Carolina, you have Super Tuesday. You can't just have one or two states decide this. You've got to allow a lot of the country to decide this. So, I know that the political elites are saying everybody needs to get behind Donald Trump. Well, I've always fought against the political elites because that's not what the people want.
But if Donald Trump gets over 50%, is this race over?
I think what I've said is I want to be stronger tomorrow than I was in Iowa. And I think we're going to do that. And everybody wants to say what they think is going to happen. But what I'll tell you is if you talk to the people in New Hampshire, they want to make sure that there's somebody that's going to deal with inflation and stop the wasteful spending of Republicans and Democrats. They want to get our kids reading again and go back to the basics in education. They want to secure this border with no more excuses. They want law and order back in our country. And they see the world on fire, and they want to know that we're going to protect Americans and prevent future wars. That's what they're talking about. Nobody's talking about the fact that they think they've got to have Donald Trump. The political elites are talking about that. But your average people are not saying that. They're saying they don't want any more chaos. They want something more stable.
More of that interview later on the CBS Evening News. Our thanks to Norah for sharing that. And for now, we're joined by Nancy Cook and Tom LoBianco. Nancy, senior national political correspondent for Bloomberg News, and Tom is a national politics reporter at 24 Site and also wrote a biography, pretty good one, of former Vice President Mike Pence. Good to see both of you here. Sure sounds like she's saying, everybody take a deep breath. this thing is not over by Wednesday morning. A lot more time to go. Is she going to have the juice necessary, though, Nancy, to keep going?
Well, I think I spoke with her campaign manager over the weekend, and I think that their argument really is that there are a number of undeclared voters in each of these upcoming states, including the Super Tuesday states, and their argument is they're going to try to win over the Republicans who are disenchanted with Trump, as well as these undeclared voters, and basically make that a coalition who can support Nikki Haley. That's sort of their strategy moving forward. I think my question is, will she have the money to continue to compete? Donors have made it clear to her this week that if she doesn't perform well in New Hampshire, that they will not keep giving money to that effort. And so she needs a strong showing, even if it's a second place. It has to show that she's within a close margin to Donald Trump in order to just keep her campaign funded and really competitive through mid-March.
And we should remind people, New Hampshire's tomorrow. South Carolina isn't for what, 5, almost 6 weeks.
Right.
So you have to be able to bankroll something that can last another month and a half, which is not easy, as Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott and others have demonstrated over the last month or so. How close is too close for her to Donald Trump tomorrow night?
Oh boy.
What would cause them worry?
I think if you look at the campaign memos that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, the campaign co-chairs for Trump, put out, I think they'll tell you that anything above 10 points counts as a blowout for Trump, and it should be over. Now, of course, Trump people have been saying it should be over for months now. Shouldn't even be a primary. No debates, no nothing. Should have been done months ago. Haley just now, very interesting, with Norah O'Donnell tamping down the expectations. And we've seen all those polls that have come out recently with her numbers. DeSantis dropping out, Christie dropping out, didn't seem to help her here. Just that low energy primary that's been going on. Judge Judy wasn't enough, at least not yet. So I don't know. I mean, Haley's going to say lower, Trump's going to say higher, and again, Nancy said, is there money to continue?
Right. Do we have any sense, certainly among donors, and then here on the ground, of what DeSantis dropping out at the 11th hour does to either help Trump or Haley?
Well, a lot of the people that I talk to think that it's going to help Trump because DeSantis's record and his rhetoric really was sort of like a Trump light policy. And so a lot of those supporters are expected to go to Trump, and then so it's, I don't think it really helps Haley having, him drop out at all.
You guys get the sense that we have that a lot of the, you said low energy, but a lot of the joy is out of this because it seems so inevitable that at some point here in March, mathematically, Trump will have it and it's basically over?
Well, I don't like to prescribe to that just because, you have to remember Haley, we didn't expect her to be the last one facing Trump. And, she really sort of built her campaign slowly. She did very well in the debates. Donors ended up recognizing that and funding her. So I think it's a little bit too early to just say, race is over. Let's see what happens tomorrow night and let's see how she continues to perform. But I think it's safe to say that taking on Trump, who is, really almost an incumbent president, who still has a huge breadth of support in the Republican Party and who really speaks to its voters on key things like immigration and the economy, is going to be very, very tough. And what Haley needs to do is take him on directly, not just about things like his age, which she's done, but also his policies and potentially his behavior. She has been very wary to confront him, and I think that she will really have to step up those attacks on him if she's going to succeed, because he's stepping up the attacks on her.
Real quick, you've tracked running mates or potential running mates before. What do you make of this early list?
I don't buy into the big names making a lot of splash. And this is what I hear from my Trump sources. Stefanik, certainly not Nikki Haley, but there's this, call it the Steve Bannon circa 2017 line. You fly too close to the sun in Trump world. He doesn't like that.
Right.
So the question is, who can get enough attention and then dial it back just a little bit? Stefanik had that with the college presidents. The name I hear a lot, and I wrote a list about this probably about a month ago, Ben Carson keeps coming up independently. I never would have guessed that. Tim Scott, obviously, very into it, got married.
Right, was going to get married.
Going to get married, got engaged. I'd watch Ben Carson right now.
Okay, we'll see. We got plenty of time to talk about that. But Nancy Cook, Tom Loviago, thank you for stopping by. I know you guys are just down the hall from us here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
But we'll talk again soon. Let's remind everyone what exactly is at stake Tuesday night here in New Hampshire. Republicans are set to award the next 22 delegates in the GOP race for the nomination. Delegates, remember, are awarded proportionally in New Hampshire, and a contender has to earn at least 10% of the overall vote to be awarded delegates. So anyone who hits double digits essentially will get something coming out of New Hampshire. The eventual Republican Party presidential nominee needs to win at least 1,215 of the 2,429 delegates that are up for grabs. According to CBS News estimates so far, lest you need a reminder, it is early. It is, because former President Donald Trump leads the pack with just 20 delegates, one in Iowa. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis picked up 8 and will hold on to them despite, for now, dropping out. Nikki Haley earns 7, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who also dropped out, has won 3. For more on what to watch for and how to watch for it in New Hampshire, let's turn to CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Polling, Anthony Salvanto, who joins us from New York. Anthony, when, remind us, does voting begin in New Hampshire? Because there are multiple answers to this. And in your view, where in the state are places to watch for signals of who's going to be winning this?
Hey, Ed, and that's a great lead-in. We got delegate math. We are getting into the political wonkery of all of this, right? And I will take you even further into the weeds in a second. Look, famously, there's a town of Dixville Notch that starts voting at midnight. But most of this, to answer your question, will be polls closing, all of them, by 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. But I want to then break into this because I want to show you what we're going to be watching for at the desk. And if I start by showing you the results of the 2016 primary where Donald Trump won big, well, it's not going to tell you that much. This is a very red map because he sort of won going away there. But I'm going to show you a map of the 2022 Senate primary in New Hampshire. I told you we were going to get into the weeds here, but if I can't do it on America Decides, where can I, right? New Hampshire does this by town. And there were a couple of candidates here. Don Bolduc, who was running on, if you will, a more MAGA platform, talked about his view that the election was stolen. But Chuck Morse was the more establishment candidate, had more of that establishment Republican backing. And I think this is the race that if Nikki Haley is going to do okay, this is the race that's probably going to have the best correlation there I'm going to be watching. So the areas in green, and I'll zoom in here, Ed, a little bit. The areas here in and around Manchester, a lot of these are kind of exurbs or further suburbs of Boston. Maybe a little bit better there, whereas there's going to be areas as we get a little bit into Nashua, we get a little bit further aside here, that was all more purple. That was all a little bit more, say, Trump, if you will, or could be more Trump. That's one of the things that I think we're going to be watching. And the fun part of this, Ed, finally, is that New Hampshire does this, as you can see, by town. So you get a lot of really micro data, and you really walk through and parse it, Ed.
In 30 seconds or less, remind us, Anthony, why the influence of undeclared voters, independent voters, matters so much in New Hampshire.
Well, on the file and in the exit polls, you can see that the electorate's going to be about a third. I put 36% up there on the board, about a third of unaffiliated voters coming in. I know there's 73,000 who voted in 2016 that are still on the file today and still unaffiliated. They could have an influence, but I'm going to button it up with this. You still have to do well among Republicans. They still make up the bulk of the Republican primary, Ed.
So to button it up, 36% of those showing up tomorrow are expected to be independents, and that's the ball game. That's where Nikki Haley's hoping to draw some of her support.
If history is a guide, we'll see what happens. Maybe she gets bigger turnout of that. That number goes up, it probably is to her benefit. But that's about the ballpark. You get in the high one-third, maybe you get close to 40%. If it goes over 40%, she's probably gaining ground at least, yeah.
All righty. Anthony Salvanto, no decisions will be made by CBS without consulting you, so we'll be looking for you tomorrow. Thank you again, as always.
Indeed.
And rest up. It's going to be a long night. President Biden is not on the ballot in New Hampshire this year. Next, the latest on the attempts by some for him to win the state through a write-in campaign. Now, back in 1992, then Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton's campaign appeared to be on the brink due to allegations of infidelity. His path to the White House faced a crucial test in New Hampshire and the rest is history.
While the evening is young, and we don't know yet what the final tally will be, I think we know enough to say with some certainty that New Hampshire tonight has made Bill Clinton the comeback kid.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We love music as much as you do.
CBS Mornings. Your morning routine just got better.
I love that.
CBS Mornings.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did
English?
any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We take you places, teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad. We're going to uplift you.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. I mean, you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
When weather turns extreme.
A massive storm with winds of 150 miles per hour.
The storm strengthened again overnight.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS News.
I wake up every morning asking what's happening in the world, why is this happening, and how do we answer that question? After the tragic loss of beloved newsman Tim Russert, his son went on a worldwide journey to find himself.
I struggled with his grief for a long time.
How Luke Russert is honoring the legacy of his father when we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. Democrats in New Hampshire are also heading to the polls on Tuesday. The issue is it doesn't officially count. The Democratic National Committee has dropped New Hampshire as its first primary, instead rewarding that slot to South Carolina, in part because President Biden believes that state better reflects the diversity of the Democratic Party and the country. New Hampshire has a state law, however, requiring it hold its primary before any other state, so they're still going first. The results won't count towards the DNC's official presidential delegate count. There's also been an 11th hour wrinkle, as CBS News has confirmed an AI-generated call is falsely telling Democratic voters not to vote in tomorrow's primary. Here's part of that false AI-generated call.
What a bunch of malarkey. We know the value of voting Democratic when our votes count. It's important that you save your vote for the November election.
I want to remind you again, that is a fake AI-generated call. But Skylar Henry, the kind of AI-generated content campaigns have been worried about. Skylar Henry joins us now, CBS News correspondent. How is the Biden campaign reacting to this call?
Yeah. Well, the Biden campaign, the Biden write-in campaign, they both say that they've reached out to New Hampshire's Attorney General to see what sort of legal steps that they can do to try to track down ultimately where this came from. I think that it is interesting. This is the cherry on top of an already complicated sundae, if you will, in terms of this write-in campaign to begin with. This is something that started back in October, where ultimately grassroots effort group of supporters here in New Hampshire ultimately came out to say they want to see President Biden's name on the ballot. They're going around, they're asking people to do just that. It is a complicated process. It is a process that has not been the most successful at all times, but it's something that they say that they want to get worked out.
Basically, you got to go to the bottom of the ballot.
Correct.
Fill in the write-in circle, like on your old Scantron tests, and then write in Joe Biden.
That's right.
And some version of that, President Biden, Joseph Biden, Joe Biden will count.
Biden-Harris ticket, that works too.
How concerned are Democrats that the other Democrats already on the ballot, Marianne Williamson and Congressman Dean Phillips, could do better than the president, or if not beat the president, at least keep the margins closer in a way that they're just not comfortable with?
Well, if you look at certain polling, right, where you show Biden, Williamson, Phillips on a certain poll, it obviously shows a significant gap between President Biden and the rest of the competition. But when you have Williamson, Phillips, and other, that gap shrinks.
Right.
And so that is one of the things that Democrats say that they are concerned about. But I spoke with California Congressman Ro Khanna just yesterday, and he said that a win is a win. Yes, it might put a bit of a black eye on the Biden-Harris campaign to see that another Democrat has a significant amount of the vote, but they say that they're not worried because of what you pointed out, in that South Carolina ultimately jumps this list, and that the winner in this contest is really a winner in name only.
Yeah. All right. Skylar Henry, we'll be tracking that, and on the subplots we'll have to track on Tuesday. Thank you for being here. Democrats are facing a tough 2024 Senate map. After the break, we hear from the chair of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the guy responsible for getting Democrats elected to the Senate, about his party's chances of keeping the upper chamber. But let's go back to 2020. Joe Biden's campaign suffered what he called a gut punch in Iowa. New Hampshire brought a similar result. Here was Biden's response, as well as some of the victor's speech from that night.
So when you hear all these pundits and experts, cable TV talkers talked about the race, tell them it ain't over, man. We're just getting started.
Let me say tonight that this victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
You're streaming America Decides.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app. Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship
with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Our story's just begun.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high?
Where are these coming from?
That's the million-dollar question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking, what's happening in the world? Why is this happening? And how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
Welcome back to America Decides. Democrats are leaning into the issue of abortion rights up and down the ballot this year. The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, or the organization responsible for getting Democrats elected to the Senate, has even launched a website criticizing Republicans for their stance on the issue. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian sat down with the chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Gary Peters, to discuss the party's strategy for keeping the Senate.
Is abortion rights still a winning issue for Democrats in this cycle?
There's no question. It continues to be a powerful issue. We continue to see it play out in recent referendums. In Ohio, for example, a recent referendum. We know it is incredibly powerful. We're now looking at other referendums that will likely be on the ballot in key battleground states across the country. And we know when people have an opportunity to make their voice heard at the ballot box, they take advantage of that. They show up, they vote in big numbers, and clearly Republican candidates are on the wrong side of this issue, and it's going to hurt them come election time.
Particularly in some of these red states, Ohio, Montana, where you have some competitive contest with Senator Sherrod Brown, Senator Jon Tester, both incumbents. Are you advising them to lean into this issue? How are you advising them to navigate this issue of abortion rights specifically in those states?
Well, our incumbents take the positions that they care deeply about, and first and foremost, they're about their state. Jon Tester is all about what he believes is best for the people of Montana. And I know he feels very strongly that women should have reproductive freedom in Montana, just like they should have that everywhere in the country. Sherrod Brown has a long history. People know exactly where Sherrod is, so he will lean in. And that's because it comes from who they are. It's about who they are as individuals that leads their campaigns.
I mean, more broadly speaking, when you look at the map, obviously it's a bit more challenging than it was in the last cycle, but is there a scenario where Democrats can retain the majority?
Oh, absolutely. I'm confident. Certainly we have our challenges in the cycle, but you know, I was the DSCC chair last cycle, and I remember coming into that job and folks said, Gary, this is a monumental task. You're going to have to go against history. The party in power of the White House loses in the midterm, all of the factors that were in the environment at that time. And I said, no, we have, the issues are on our side. We have candidates of superior quality. We're running better campaigns. And we made history. We did, for the first time, not only held the majority, but expanded it. First time since the 1930s that happened. And when I look at what happened last cycle, we have the same dynamics this cycle. The same thing. People are saying it's tough. I'm going, yes, I've been there. We have all been there. We're still going to win. We have superior candidates. We continue to win on issues like reproductive freedom. We have a clear advantage where American people know that we are on their side. And we're going to run superior campaigns. So we're going to bring back all of our incumbents and hold the states we currently have, including Michigan, which is an open seat with the retirement of Senator Stabenow, but we're going to have a great candidate there and a clear contrast. And then we're going to go on the offense. We have real opportunities in both Florida and Texas to pick up 2 seats. So I'm excited about the race. There's a lot on the line.
With respect to President Biden, I mean, is there any concern that he could potentially be a drag on the ticket, particularly with respect to some of these Senate candidates? I mean, even in your own home state, I think it was the Detroit News that found that the former president leads President Biden by 8 points, and only 17% of likely voters say that President Biden deserves another term. So how do your candidates overcome that?
Well, first off, it's really early in the polling cycle, so I always take those with a real grain of salt, and someone who's been involved in campaigns for a lot of years.
But it's not just Michigan. I mean, it's other battleground states too.
It is, yeah, it is, and you see that. And when you think about it, polling at this early stage, there's really no risk for someone when someone calls up and says, hey, who are you voting for? That's a low-risk thing to tell a pollster, and you may be angry about something. There's issues out there that people may not like, and so they'll express that. But it's a whole different calculus for those individuals on Election Day. Now they're actually making a decision. Who do you want to be the president for the next 4 years? We know with President Trump, it was absolute chaos in this country for 4 years. We know there's been tremendous accomplishments by President Biden, and people will make that choice on Election Day. And it's also about running good campaigns and about making sure that our voters turn out. And that's what we were able to do in our Senate races last cycle. We're going to do it again. And in some of those states where it's difficult for the president to win, we also have candidates who have proven that they run above the Democratic base.
With respect to some of the other key Senate races, one of which you mentioned, Arizona, have you gotten any further indication from Senator Sinema if she is going to run?
I have not. No, she is still a valuable member of our caucus. I do a great deal of work with her on the Homeland Security Committee. She's very involved in the border discussions right now. We'll wait to see what she plans on doing.
Have you had any recent conversations with her?
I've had recent conversations about a variety of things, but not about the election.
And then one other race I want to ask you about more specifically, the state of New Jersey. I know you have called on Senator Bob Menendez to resign. Recently, he indicated that he will likely make a decision about re-election this spring. Do you think he should run? And if he does, would the DSCC support him if he wins the primary?
No, I've been very clear. I think he should resign. That position stands, and it's not going to change. But I'm also confident that a Democrat will be elected in New Jersey. That's going to be pretty clear. That's not one we worry about. There are a number of other candidates that have already announced that they're running for that position.
But just to be clear, if he does run, if he were to win the primary, DSCC would or wouldn't back him?
I've been clear on my position.
That does it for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern here in New Hampshire on primary day for complete coverage of the New Hampshire primary on a special edition of America Decides. Thank you for being with us on behalf of all of us at CBS News here in New Hampshire, where you're streaming CBS News.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep